First tattoo?
Yeah.
Relax, amigo. It's gonna look okay.
Only okay?
No worries, boss. I'm one of the tattoo artists in the city.
You mean one of the best tattoo artists in the city, right?
Something like that. Yeah.
Aren't you supposed to draw it first?
Stay in your lane, bro.
Just okay is not okay.
Have you ever worked with Dr. Francis?
Oh yeah, he's okay.
Just okay?
Guess who just got reinstated? Well, not officially. Nervous?
Yeah.
Yeah, me too. Don't worry about it. We'll figure it out. I'll see you in there.
Just okay is not okay.
Hey, welcome to the crossing, everybody. Where just okay is not okay, right? How many of you had just an okay Christmas? A little below average, mediocre Christmas? Anybody? Right, because just okay is not okay. Hey, we are so glad you're here. If you're visiting with us for the very first time, thanks for coming up the hill and joining us here at the crossing. Today's a little bit different because I kind of wanted, this is kind of going to be a standalone message to kind of kick off 2019. Next week we'll start a brand new series. But today, I just kind of wanted to take a little time to kind of look back, and then I wanted to spend some time also looking kind of ahead of 2019. Now, I kind of thought about calling this kind of like the State of the Crossing address, sort of like the State of the Union. I thought I'd get a couple elders to sit up behind me so that way they could either stand and let you know when to applaud or to look absolutely miserably bored, you know, sort of like our government does. So somewhere throughout this service, if you feel compelled, this half could stand up and applaud, the rest stay seated, of course, and then you all could stand and applaud, and then maybe there'll be a time when you all will stand and applaud. I don't know. But it's kind of the State of the Crossing. And I just wanted to kind of look back. And I'll just say that in 2018, and even before that, I am completely blown away by what God is doing with such a messy group of people. I mean, I am. It just absolutely blows my mind. We are approaching, this coming year, May 1st, will be this church's 7th birthday. This church will be 7 years old. The crossing will be 7 years old, May 1st, 2019. And in our brief time, there you go. Yes, that's a polite applause, yes. We've survived 7 years. We haven't blown this place up yet, so that's good. And in that time, we've had some really incredible crossing moments. But I can tell you that my mind never stops spinning. It never stops thinking. It never stops anticipating all the worst case scenarios, all the things that could go wrong. And I'll admit that I spend a lot of times thinking of all the worst case scenarios, and 99.9% of them never actually happen. So that's a good thing. But one of the things is, over the last 7 years, there have been many times where I have said, wow, I did not see that coming. There have been so many times I thought, whoa, I never could have imagined that. I never could have foreseen that. I've been caught off guard, and I've shared this a little bit. I've had the opportunity to travel and be involved with a discipleship group of guys from across the country, and I hang out with other ministers in the region and other guys that are doing ministry also. And it always kind of blows me away because when I'm first meeting these guys, they kind of want to know a little bit about the crossing. And when I start sharing about the crossing, their mouths kind of open. They're like, you got to be kidding. No way. Are you serious? And as they're doing that, I'm looking at it like, why am I not as excited as they seem to be? And I don't know, if you've ever lived in the mountains, and I had a chance to live in East Tennessee, or if you've ever had a chance to live even half of a year on the coast, if you've ever had somebody come from out of town that's not used to being in the mountains, the entire time they're there, they're like, this is beautiful. How do you ever, never get sick of this? But if you've lived there a while, you're like, they'll be there in the morning. They're here all the time. You know, or the ocean, it works that way. You know, whoosh, whoosh, does it all day long, you know? Sometimes it's low, sometimes it's high, but it always does that. And I think what happens is you sometimes start to take for granted and miss it. And one of the things I'll have to admit is God has been, he has been blessing this collective tribe of people in just incredible ways. And honestly, I'm afraid that I personally have at times been kind of yawning through it all. I've been kind of taking it for granted, what God is doing. And I sometimes forget, and if this is the only church you've been a part of in a while, sometimes it's a good thing to go visit other churches. It is. Because I think if you do, I know the times I've traveled and been involved in other churches, there are times I'm like, I miss this body. I miss being with this group, and we are so blessed and so blessed. And I just kind of want to remind you of some of the things that God has been doing here at the Crossing. And I need to say this up front, and if you've been around here long enough to know, you know this is true. But if you're visiting, if you came and to check us out, if you happen to stumble onto this location, because you have to really come looking for us, right? Then I want to make sure you know this. This is not in any way us trying to be prideful or bragging about what we've done, because we've not done squat. This is God's church, all right? He is the head of this church. So I want to make that very clear, all right? So when you hear this, I want you to hear this through the lens of this is what God is choosing to do with this collective body known as the Crossing, all right? So with that having said, I just want to share a few things and understand that numbers do not consume this leadership. Numbers do not consume this staff. Now, I do find it interesting that God chose to name a book in the Old Testament Numbers, so he obviously was fascinated with numbers, but I can tell you, we never set out to say, we want to be a big church. Let's be a big church. Let's be a mega church. Let's be one of those churches that people talk about. We never, ever set out to do that. We just haven't. Our only desire as a church was to make sure that we made the main thing the main thing. That we continue to always make the main thing the main thing. We've always wanted to be a place that told other people about Jesus, that loved other people like Jesus, and made the people that gathered here better followers of Jesus. That's always been our goal. We are not consumed with numbers, but I can tell you that we do count because everybody that comes in these doors count. Every single one of you count. You count to us, but more importantly, you count to him. And so we do count. But every number has a name. And every name has a story. And our concern is, bottom line, is that in your story, Jesus is the vital part of it. That he's the foundation of your story. And that's why we exist. But I just want to share that in 2017, which was 2 years ago, this church averaged 633 in attendance, which was a 29% jump in growth from the year before. Last year, we averaged 782 in attendance, which was a 24% growth from the year before that, which was a 29% growth. So last year was 782. Our last quarter of 2018, the last 3 months, we averaged over 833. Christmas at the Crossing and at Easter, both times we were over 1,500 people for those services. Last year in our weekend services, we had, the next slide, we had 15 weekends last year that were over 800. The 4 is how many weekends we had over 800 in our previous 6 years. So 15 last year, 4 in the previous 6. So you know, people are coming. Now, I don't know about you, but if you go to a restaurant and you're always the only one eating there, then that's a bad sign, right? Unless it's your kitchen. That's okay. But it's a bad sign. And so, you know, if you've been to places where like, I'm not going back there again, but the fact is there are people actually showing up here. And I think that's because God is leading them here. The last 5 years we've experienced in 2014, 24%, 2015, 11%. This is growth. 24% growth, 11% growth, 6% growth, 29% growth, and 24% growth in the last 5 years. Now, here's why I tell you that. There's a church growth guru named Gary McIntosh from Biola University, and he studies churches and leadership and growth. And he made up this little chart that he says is kind of an indicator of natural average churches. And he studied all of them, that this is an indicator in the U.S. of a healthy church. And this is the chart. Is poor growth is 2% per year. Fair growth is 3 to 5% per year. Good growth, 6 to 8. Excellent growth, 9 to 11. And outstanding growth, 12 to 15. Incredible growth, 16 to 20 per year. So let me go back and tell you. That means that in 2016, we had a good year of growth. In 2015, we had an excellent year in growth. But that means that in 2014, 2017, and last year, we had more than incredible growth because it only goes up to 20%. So the growth that's taking place here is beyond incredible. It's not even on the chart. And I say that again, we're not saying we're doing this. Because all it takes is to spend a minute with me, 5 minutes with the rest of the staff, and a half hour with our elders to know that we are too screwed up and too messed up to take any credit for this. And I guarantee you there ain't anybody out there sitting there thinking, yeah, it's all because of me. Yeah, it's because of me. I'm the reason this church is. So I don't know of anybody in this room that believes that this is happening because of them. There's nobody on our leadership that believes that. I know I don't. Matter of fact, as I've said before, I am blown away by the fact that God is obviously blessing this church for this season. And he's doing it with us as a part of it. Now, I want you to think about that. He's chosen to bless this church with some beyond incredible growth while your rear ends have been occupying these seats. You are a part of this. And you can't say that all the time. But with God's blessing, all things are possible. And there are many years of potential growth to come. And here's why I say that. Because there are tens of thousands of unchurched and de-churched people that live within a radius of this church of 45 minutes to an hour. And the reason I say 45 minutes to an hour is we have dozens of people, probably 3 dozen more, that drive to this church from 45 to more than an hour away to worship with this church. So when you take that into account of the number of people that are willing to drive an hour to be a part of this church, there are tens of thousands of people who are unchurched or de-churched and have no relationship with Jesus Christ. So this isn't even scratching the surface of what can happen and honestly should happen if we care anything about lost people. And so that is just an example. We have so much more that can happen as long as God is a part of this. But I'm going to tell you this, they're not going to find this church by driving by. You don't just say, hey, let's go get something to eat and drive by this place. It's going to take this body to continue to invite people. And here's the thing. If God's hand is moving in real time here, and I realize we're not the only church in this world he's blessing, so understand that. We haven't cornered God on the market here. But if God has his hand here and we're seeing what he is doing in real time, where we are seeing beyond incredible growth in real time, then if you have people that you work with, that you live with, that you work with, if you have people like that do not know Jesus or do not know God, why in the world would you not want to invite them someplace where God is moving? Why would you not? And you're going to have to, and you might even have to bring them up here to find this place. But if God is moving here and you believe that, and you believe in God and that you believe that Jesus Christ is the answer to our problems, then there are a lot of people you need to be inviting to come up here and be a part of this. Speaking of God moving, he's been stirring the waters as well. In 2017, we had 17 baptisms. Our record before that was 23. But last year, we had 85 baptisms. Now that again, that is a very polite applause. I don't know why, maybe I didn't say it clearly enough. We had 85 baptisms that got into the water here last year. There you go. So God is stirring the waters. He's stirring people's hearts, and they're actually stepping out, and they're humbling yourself, because that's a very humbling experience. And they are being buried with Christ and resurrecting to a new life. I mean, that is exactly what that symbolizes. And so God is moving here. Let me just talk on giving a little bit, but I'm not going to spend a lot of time on that, because every time I do, the finance ministry team says, no, you messed that up. You just said it wrong. And so I'm just telling you, that's why I'm not on the finance team, okay? I'm not. But let me just tell you what I do know. The last 2 weekends of 2018, okay, that was last weekend and the weekend before, this church came together and gave $61,846 in just 2 weekends. Now, that is not counting our building program for. If you add that in, it was a whole lot more, because there are people who are putting money into the for account every weekend. But $62,000, which is almost twice what was given in 2017. There was $33,000 given at the end of the 2017. In just the last 2 weeks. So that doubled in size. And here's what I want to say about that. It just gives you a glimpse of what this church could do if everyone plays a part. And I say everyone, and I'm assuming, because I don't know who gives here. I don't know what you give unless you tell me. And I don't know what gets put in the boxes here. But here's the thing I do know. HUD said that there were more single dollar bills, $5 bills, $10 bills, and $20 bills in those boxes in the last 2 weeks than have been ever in those boxes in like a month or two combined. Which tells me that people were bringing $1, people were bringing $5, people were bringing 10 and 20. And so as I've said from the very beginning here, every amount counts. God does not expect us to all give equally. We're not all supposed to get out our checkbook and write the same equal amount. But what he does ask for us is to trust him and to sacrifice equally. And every amount counts. And so what we saw in just those last 2 weekends, because I know people were bringing $1, they were bringing 5, they're bringing 10, they're bringing 20, is we doubled the impact from the year before. So don't you think that your little bit won't matter. It moves the dial. It changes things. It will change things. And so I'm not going to focus more on that. That's all I'm going to say about the giving part, but I can tell you, I can only imagine what God could do through this body if everybody brought just something. I don't care if it's a dime. And if you can't scrape that out of your ashtray in your car because nobody uses them anymore, it would make a difference. Not to us, it would make a difference, the ripple effect with the impact that happens through this body in the ministries around the world. And let me give you an example of what this church did last year, only last year, outside of these walls in this community. Every Monday night, we have a ministry up here called Light Shine Ministry. It's not even our ministry. It's a lady from this community that said, hey, can we use your facility? Now, we have people from this church that are there to volunteer every Monday night, and they could use more. But every Monday night, right over there on top of the brick building there, we have 100 to 150 plus people showing up just to enjoy a meal every Monday night. Last May, UC Claremont asked us if they could have their commencement here. We said sure, and so we had a packed house in here just to be able to allow UC Claremont to do their commencement here rather than all the way in Loveland at the Oasis Conference Center. So we had a whole campus full of students that are graduating. Our next door neighbors over here at the Southwestern Development, Ohio, this church for the last 2 years in a row has bought Christmas gifts for every resident. 103 residents over there have been blown away by your all's generosity. Every single one of them had a Christmas because of this family. And I want to tell you, in talking to the people that attend here, and they come here usually both services, is they are blown away by this church's generosity. It makes a difference. Last year we partnered with Empower Youth on Wednesday night in the summer. It was like in late July or August, I can't remember. But we served meals to over 700 people with Empower Youth out at Bethel. They said it was the most people that ever came for a meal, and they had the most volunteers that ever showed up. We thought we were going to have 40, but 75 of you showed up to serve meals at Bethel last year. We started to Celebrate Recovery in 2018, led by Jay and Eva Rower. We have an Al-Anon group that meets here weekly. We have a homeschool group that meets here weekly. We had an organization from this community called Click Wow, which used our church lobby to basically pass out tablets for free to families that wouldn't be able to have one otherwise. So over 50 children received tablets this past month right here in our lobby. We had over 100 children that were rescued from poverty by having the Compassion International experience here. So over 100 children were sponsored and rescued from poverty from this church family. We had over 1,000 children and adults that joined us for our trunk or treat on this campus, and we couldn't even count. There were more than 1,000. We helped and hosted the Turkey Crusade again, which is not just this church, but a lot of churches partnering with Christian Help Center. And so we had over 325 families from this community that were blessed with a turkey meal for Thanksgiving. Our outreach team, our GO team, led by Teresa Walker down front here, provided and set up curtains for a photo booth at Batavia's prom. After prom, they provided 100 breakfast bars for the Claremont County Fire Wives Association breakfast. They handed out 200 bottles of water for the Bulldog Blast 5K. They had a booth at the Eastside Adventure Challenge. They handed out over 200 bottles of water at the National Sheriff's Night Out. And they worked concession stands for both the Batavia High School Homecoming and again for Senior Night. Those are just examples of what happened over the last 52 weeks of this year. So we don't just sit here, we don't just exist to come in here and sit, we actually go out and serve, which is what a church is supposed to exist to do. We have ministries like the Crossing Path Outdoor Ministry that started this year that has really done a great job putting paths out here in this incredible campus that God has given us. So you can come out here now and walk through some incredible wooded trails and up in the field with our Crossing Paths. Our Crossing Rocks ministry that got started last year, I mean, they are rocking. They are putting rocks out, and they've made it everywhere from Florida, California, Canada. They're going everywhere. Our number of community groups have increased. The number of people involved in community groups increased. We had our first MAD camp, which was MAD. It was music, arts, and drama, where our children did an incredible job with this closing musical of the MAD camp, and they did fantastic. We hired Jai, our new student minister. Jai and Angela came over from Indianapolis back a few months ago. And I'm going to say this, our students, I get it. The one thing that's happened a lot here over this last 7 years is we've had a lot of people leading our student ministry. And so because of that, I get it. There is a lack of trust of investing in the student ministry because all they do is they just leave. And this is not a negative to the people who've served here in the past, but I'm just telling you, we realize that's been an issue. But we have somebody we now believe God sent here for this time, and he gets it. He has incredible vision. He has incredible passion for your students. And he doesn't want to just reach the students. He wants to partner with the parents, with this community. So for those of you who have teens or know of teens who haven't been over their second hour on Sunday mornings, I'm going to tell you right now, make them go. I know it's a second or third or fourth chance for some of them. Tell them just to pretend it's a video game and they died and they got to hit reset and start over again. They'll get that. They understand that because they lose in video games all the time and hit reset and start over. And we're just asking them to trust us. Matter of fact, we're asking them to trust Jai, and we trust Jai. And so I'm just encouraging you, if you have a student or if you are a teen in here right now, it's worth it to take the risk and be a part of that. We had our Christmas to Crossing, as I said. We had just under 1,600 attendants. We heard a few comments. One was, our Christmas Eve services are so upbeat and joyful. Now, that's a great compliment, but I'm also thinking, what are the other ones like? Someone said, I've been singing Silent Night my entire life, but I never felt like I did tonight. Someone else said, how many churches have their lead, executive, and pastoral staff dress up in Hawaiian shirts and sing to the tune of Beach Boys? The answer to that, hopefully not many, because that's pretty crazy. When we started as a church and we were brand new, we decided to partner with and help another church get started down in Raleigh, North Carolina. We invested $36,000 in the first 3 years of their life, and really early on in ours. We didn't have that kind of money, but we felt like God started us, we're going to help start somebody else. I asked David, who's at Relentless Church in Raleigh, just to send an update. They went fully independent in 2017, so we don't send them money anymore. Matter of fact, nobody else does. They became a fully independent church in 2017. But when they started in 2014, they averaged 80. Right now, they're averaging 160. They have 5 staff. They've had 51 baptisms since day one, and last year was their best year ever by having 17. Now, that's the equivalent to what we had the year before when we were running 600. Keep that in perspective. Right now, their church is partnering with a specific village in Honduras. They're sending a scout team there in April of 2019. They sponsor 36 kids in that village alone, and they're going to be partnering with that church in Honduras. They are moving into their first permanent, no longer portable location in downtown Raleigh this month. And I asked him to share a story, to share how every number has a name, and every name has a story. And here's what he wrote. He said, this is the story. Travis was coerced into coming to Relentless on opening day in 2014. Now, some of you are like, I can relate to that. That's the only reason I'm here, right? He was coerced. He was not interested. And once I got to him, he said he enjoyed parts of Relentless, but did not believe in the magic, meaning the supernatural to him was somewhat absurd. He and his family came on and off for 2 years, and then he really started leaning into the gospel in 2017. And even though he wasn't a believer, we started to put him into our worship team rotation on guitar. The worship team really ministered to Travis. This was a guy who had never been in church as an adult except for a few spotty experiences here and there. In the spring of 2018, he gave his life to Christ. We baptized he and his wife, Caroline, and then later on we baptized their teenage daughter. Today, he sings and plays on our worship team almost every week and is always inviting people to Relentless. It's just one story of the untold and unconvinced that God has blessed us to reach. And he finishes with this. we at Relentless continue to feel the ripple effects in your kingdom investment in us. So when you give to the crossing, you're giving through the crossing. So that even churches in Raleigh, North Carolina are impacted. So, I got a new Apple Watch, so I got to see how much time I got left. All right, so here's the thing. God's hand has been moving with this church body in just a brief history. God has been blessing us better than we deserve, more than we are deserving of. And he is an unbelievably gracious God. But here's my question. This is the one I am always thinking about, is how do we keep from becoming complacent and comfortable and okay with that? Because okay is just not okay. How do we do that? How do we not become satisfied? How do we not take our foot off the pedal? Because we're just cozy with it the way it is. We like it. It's comfortable. It's taking care of my needs. I like it right now. How do we do that? How do we truly be aware and appreciate the fact that God is working right now with this collective body in real time? How do we not take that for granted? How do we not do that? You know, I honestly thought about calling this sermon the 7-year itch. Because that's a real statement. That's a real figure of speech. It was first attributed to in the 7th year of marriage or thereabout, you get bored. You think, it's time to stray. Is this what I want for the rest of my life? So they call it the 7-year itch. But of course, that's now come to mean also being dissatisfied not only in our relationships, but in any situation, such as my job. I've been on this job for 7 years, not sure. Maybe this isn't all I'm going to do. Maybe I want to do something else. Maybe it's your house. Maybe it's your car. I would say it's also very true for church attenders and for pastoral staff. Because let me just be honest with you. The longest I've ever been serving at a church was a little over 5 years. We've been working on this one for 8. And so I'm already into uncharted territory, personally. And so I believe that is something we have to really fight against. As a matter of fact, it's not something I made up. Tony Morgan from a church consulting group called the Unstuck Group said that a church has a life cycle. He wrote about it in an article called Understanding the 7 Phases of Church's Life Cycle. And he says, regardless of uniqueness, every church has the potential to go through this very similar cycle. He studied them in U.S. and Canada, the United Kingdom. And every church, he says, all believe they're unique. And most have seen seasons of energy and vitality. All have felt or will feel the frustration of slow momentum and mission drift at times. He says, without aware leaders and intentional focus, the life cycle plays out predictably through 7 phases. And that life cycle in the church looks like that. A launch. Yep, 8 years ago. Momentum and growth. Then you start thinking, how do you be strategic with that growth? And then all of a sudden you have sustained health, and then that sustained health turns into maintenance, and then preservation, and then that church is on life support. And as a pastor, that graph there causes me to lose sleep. Because the reality is most churches, their most vibrant season, their life expectancy really is about 20 years. That's a fact. You can Google it. And that doesn't mean that every church out there is all on life support, but the reality is I know I've been a part of churches where I could see in the churches I served in where they were in that chart. Some of you have been a part of that. You know that. You've seen churches that are in just preservation mode. Let's just not screw it up. Well, we don't do those things because, the way we used to do it or the way we've always done it, or we're just not, we don't want to change. We like it the way it is. And there's going to be a day, and there's even already a day. We're only 7 years old. I always say we don't have sacred cows here. We're not old enough. We have sacred calves. We have sacred veal here because we're not even old enough to have a thing called a sacred cow. But the reality is we are always having to fight the resistance. We always have to resist the natural tendency to just say, I like it. I'm comfortable. I like it just the way it is. And that causes me to lose a lot of sleep as a leader of this church. Because he says a lot of churches get stuck in one of these phases. He says, I believe God's plan for our churches is that they grow in maturity towards a peak of sustained health. And that as methods and traditions and culture change, they continually reevaluate and refresh, finding new ways to lead people to Jesus. We are always needing to reevaluate, refresh, and even change in order to find new ways. Now, I'll tell you this will never change here. This will not change. This is our non-negotiable. But the methods, the ways we go about reaching people has to change because life changes. Most of you, I'm going to guess, don't use an outhouse anymore. And you would probably say that's a good change. So change happens. But that life cycle worries me. And here's why. Because the Spirit in me, and the staff, and this leadership, and the Spirit in you is willing. But our flesh is weak. And it is so tempting, and it's so easy to all of a sudden make this our kingdom. My church. Our church. And forget, it's his church. We better be on his agenda. We better be pursuing the path that he has for us as he utilizes us to forward his kingdom. Because the day we take our sight off of him and his ways and his will for this church is the day we become dead in the water. It's over. It's done. And we're really, to be honest, just going through the motions at that point. Because God will leave this house when it's no longer his. So as a lead pastor, my ever-consuming thought is how do we fight not being okay with just okay? Jim Collins' book, Good is the Enemy of Great, said, good is the enemy of great. And that is one of the key reasons that we have so little that becomes great, because we don't have great schools, principally because we have good schools. We don't have great government, principally because we have good government. Few people attain great lives in large part because it is just so easy to settle for a good life. And I think you could also add that few churches become great because they're satisfied with settling at just being a good church. Now, let me just say, I believe we can be a great church. But understand that when I use the word great from here forward, I'm not saying great in our economy, great based on our definition. I'm saying great based on his definition. Great based on his idea of great. And so here's why I believe this is the formula, if there's such a thing. I won't call it that, but it's not a formula. Here's what I believe that we need to continue to hang on to in order to become a great church in 2019 and beyond. And it's straight from the Word. To become a great church family, we need to stay focused on God's idea of great. And the first thing is we need to be a church that's all about pursuing the Great Commission. The Great Commission in Matthew 28:18 through 20. Jesus came and told his disciples, or followers, that's what a disciple is. I've been given all authority in heaven and on earth. Therefore, go and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit, and teach these new disciples to obey all the commands I have given you. So you need to go. First of all, when you get in here, you get in here so that you can go. We have two responsibilities as a church. It's to go ye therefore into all the world to teach, preach, and baptize. But we also have a responsibility as a church to teach and equip disciples. But you can't be strong in one way or strong in the other. We have to go, and we also have to teach and make disciples. We have to develop and equip more followers of Jesus in discipleship. And we're really going to focus on that this year. With Robert, that's one of the things that he is here to really dial into. But we cannot take our eyes off of the ball of going as well. So while we are going to try to grow deeper individually and corporately as a church, we also have to be about getting outside of these walls and going into the world that is lost and dark and hopeless and getting them here so that they can come to know Jesus Christ. So we need to be a Great Commission church. The other thing is we need to live out the Great Commandment as a church family. Matthew 22:36, teacher, which is the most important commandment of all the laws? And Jesus said, you must love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and all your mind. That's the first and greatest commandment. But the second is equally important, and that is to love your neighbor as yourself. The entire law and all the demands of the prophets are based on these two commandments. Now let me just tell you, we have a world right now that's not very loving. And it's hard to think about how in the world, but I will tell you this. You don't have to worry about the world. You have to worry about you. And it's up to you, and it's up to me. How am I going to love God this year? Am I going to love him with all my heart, with all my mind, and with all my soul, and with all my strength? And everyone that comes in contact with me, am I going to love them as I love myself? And if every single one of us individually and corporately begin to practice to love and to pursue the great commandment, then it's going to be a game changer. It's going to change things. We also need to become a church family that displays great unity. Great unity. If you think unity in the church body is not important, then you need to think again. Unity to the body of Christ is so important that it was one of the last things Jesus prayed about before he was crucified. Now you tell me that's not important. The night he's arrested, listen to what he says. In John 17:20 and 23, I am praying not only for these disciples, the ones that are hanging around me right now, but also for all who will ever believe in me through their message. So stop right there. That means that even on that night, he was about to be arrested and crucified, he was praying for you and me. Because the reason we're meeting here today, in 2019, is because of the message that they believed. And so Jesus had you and me, us, on his mind. He was praying for us. And he says, and I pray that they will all be one, just as you and I are one. As you are in me, Father, and I am in you. And may they be in us so that the world will believe you sent me. I have given them the glory you gave me so they may be one as we are one. I am in them and you are in me. May they experience such perfect unity that the world will know that you sent me and that you love them as much as you love me. You see, that's a game changer. Because when the world is looking and they see a body that claims to have Jesus Christ at the head, that has such perfect unity, it will make an incredible impact on the people who are watching. And so it matters that we are a church that has unity. Doesn't mean we all have to be uniformed, but we have to have unity. And it makes a difference. It really separates the just okay with the great. And he prayed for it, and he desires it. And finally, we need to be a church family that practice something that is completely countercultural today, and that is great commitment. Oh my goodness. And I'm preaching to me right now. But we have to be one of the most lamest generations right now of being able to pursue or keep or maintain a commitment. There's a term for it called FOMO, fear of missing out. We just don't want to commit to anything anymore because we're afraid something better might come along. So I want to keep my options open. But what it would be like if we would have a greater commitment? Hebrews 10 says this in verse 24 and 25. And let us watch out for one another to provoke love and good works, not neglecting to gather together as some are in the habit of doing, but encouraging each other in the more as you see the day approaching. Let's commit to be together. Let's be together more in worship, in our community groups, in the way we serve this community together. And let's show a greater commitment when it comes to sacrifice and generosity. 2 Corinthians chapter 8. Paul writes in verse 1, now I want you to know, dear brothers and sisters, what God in his kindness has done through the churches of Macedonia. They are being tested by many troubles, and they are very poor. But they are also filled with abundant joy, which has overflowed in rich generosity. For I can testify that they gave not only what they could afford, but far more. And they did it of their own free will. See, they weren't okay with just okay. They gave even more. Even though they couldn't afford it, they gave more. And that attitude of generosity separates the good from the great. And I don't mean great in the amount that is given, but great in the heart in which it's given. Look at how they viewed giving. Verse 4, they begged us again and again for the privilege of sharing in the gift. I've preached a lot of sermons on tithing, and I can tell you that usually when I get comments, it's not from an attitude of privilege to be able to give. Man, that's such a privilege. Thanks for bringing that to my attention. I need to step it up. Thank you. That's funny. I never hear that. But that's the way they looked at it. It was a privilege. It was a privilege to partner with the Lord. They even did more than we had hoped. For their first action was to give themselves to the Lord and to us, just as God wanted them to do. So we have urged Titus, who encouraged your giving in the first place, to return to you and encourage you to finish this ministry of giving. Since you excel in so many ways in your faith, your gifted speakers, your knowledge, your enthusiasm, and your love from us, I want you to excel also in the gracious act of giving. You know the generous grace of our Lord Jesus Christ. Though he was rich, yet for your sakes he became poor, so that by his poverty he could make you rich. So here's my advice. It would be good for you to finish what you started a year ago. Last year you were the first who wanted to give, and you were the first to begin doing it. Now you should finish what you started. Let the eagerness you showed in the beginning be matched now by your giving. That statement tells me, don't ever get comfortable. Don't get complacent. Keep it going. And then he finishes with this. Give in proportion to what you have. Whatever you give is acceptable if you give it eagerly. And give according to what you have, not what you don't have. In other words, he's just saying what I've always said. Everything counts. It's not equal gifts. It's equal sacrifice. So let's be intentional about pursuing greatness in 2019, by pursuing what God's idea of great is in 2019. We can't relax. We can't get complacent. We can't settle for good enough or it's okay to just be okay. We can't even throw a party yet. I found this story. I'm going to close with this. And I couldn't believe it. When I first saw this title, I thought it had to be a Saturday Night Live spoof. Man drowns at a lifeguard party in New Orleans. August 2nd, 1985. City lifeguards who threw a party to celebrate a summer season with no drownings discovered a guest dead in the pool when the party was over. The body of Jerome Moody, 31, was found at the bottom of the deep end, and when 4 lifeguards on duty began clearing the pool at the end of the party, they found him. He was fully clothed and had not been swimming with other guests at the New Orleans Recreation Department Center, said Director Madeline Richard. About half of the 200 people at that party were lifeguards, and 4 of them were actually on duty that night. The lifeguards were really upset. It's a real tragedy, Richard said. This was the first annual party in memory where they could celebrate a trouble-free season. We had all been talking about it. It was the first season without a single drowning incident in all of our pools in all of New Orleans. Well, they failed to revive him, and the autopsy confirmed that drowning was the cause of death. You know what? We have a lot to be thankful for here. God has been good to us. He's been actually beyond good to us. And there have been some incredible crossing moments and some incredible blessings along the way. But there is no time for us to have a party yet. Because there are people in your life, in your centers of influence or circles of influence, who are drowning in their sin. They are terminal. They have no hope for rescue with the exception of Jesus. And as long as you know one, as long as we know one, as long as we know that within the radius of this church, that there is someone treading water, and about to go under. There's not going to be any party in here. And so I'm going to ask you to join me in being a Great Commission church, living out the Great Commandment, pursuing a unity that is unlike anything you've ever seen, and practicing a level of commitment that we have gotten so unaccustomed to. I mean, we serve a great God. He is the great I am. And I think he's worthy of that. I think he deserves it. So I'm going to ask you to stand with me and pray with me. And again, I hope if you're here that what you heard is what God is doing here, not what we're doing here. And having said that, if you came here today and you don't know Jesus as your personal Savior, and Savior means he came to rescue you. If you've not allowed him to rescue you, then as we're singing, I'm going to invite you to come to one of the crosses so people could pray with you and talk to you about that. But if you are a disciple, if you are a follower, then I want to challenge you to look at yourself in the mirror. Do a little self-evaluation of what last year was like and what this year could be. And my prayer is not that you align with the crossing. My prayer is that you get in alignment with Jesus. So let's pray.